Welcome into the Bussy and Gordy Show. It is Alec Bussy, joined as always by Carson Gordy. Thank you for tuning in on this lovely Thursday. We are recording as college football is just days away. Week 0 officially starts on Saturday, and we've got a pretty decent slate of games for Week 0. We got Notre Dame and Navy, Hawaii and Vanderbilt, and we've also got USC and San Jose State, I believe. So 3 pretty interesting games with at least some interesting programs, some interesting teams heading into the 2023 season. And Carson, we've got a fun episode today. We are going to give our season-long predictions across college football for each of the Power 5 conferences in 2023. We're also going to give our 4 college football playoff participants, as well as our national championship game, and of course the national champion. If we've got some time at the end, we're going to drop our Heisman predictions in there as well. How's that sound, man?
Sounds good. Sounds very good.
Awesome. All right, we're going to start with the ACC. We're going to go by alphabetical order, more or less, with the conferences. So that means we're going to end with the SEC, and then we'll go into the national championship with the college football playoff. Everything going first. I will let you go first with your ACC predictions in 2023. I feel like I got a good feeling where you're going to go here, because I think a lot of people are going in a certain direction.
I think people are starting to realize that Clemson still plays football. You know, they are the defending ACC champs, and they got a very favorable schedule. Realistically, they could go 12-0 in the regular season. You know, at South Carolina could be a road trap if Spencer Rattler is still performing well as a quarterback. But I'm sorry, like week 4, I'm going to have to take them to beat Florida State in the regular season. Florida State's going to be a very good team, but they're coming off of that most likely, I think, a tough LSU loss. You know, I think Jordan Travis is good. He's probably the best quarterback they've had since, let's just say it, Jameis Winston. But Clemson's got the infrastructure. Clemson's got it at home. I think those two are going to play in the ACC title game, with Clemson being the higher seed.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I also have Florida State and Clemson playing for the ACC title. And I think what's really interesting about this is in 2023, the ACC is getting rid of divisions. Obviously, historically, those two schools could not play in the ACC championship because they were playing in the same division. Now, they get to play, I think, week 3 or week 4 of the regular season, and then I think that there's going to be a rematch later on in the conference title game. I have Florida State coming out of the ACC as the ACC title winner this year, and the reason I pick that for a couple of reasons. One, I really like what they did in the transfer portal this offseason, adding Keon Coleman. That's a wide receiver 1 for Jordan Travis to throw to on the offensive side, and I think maybe the biggest return in college football outside of Olu Fashanu at Penn State, their left tackle, is maybe Jared Verse coming back to Florida State on the edge. So that should give Florida State a really good edge rusher coming off of their defensive line, which they need to get good pressure on opposing teams this year. And you look at where Clemson's at, their defensive line has kind of started to struggle here over the last couple of years in comparison to some of their national championship winning teams. They lose Brisset on the defensive line. He's obviously a first-round pick. And then, you know, I do think the addition of Garrett Riley on the offensive side as their new offensive coordinator coming over from TCU, I like what you're doing there with the 2 thumbs up. I think that's a really good hire by Dabo Swinney. But I'm still a little skeptical about how much that can really influence Clemson's offense. I am a believer in Cade Klubnik. He's a former 5-star. But he didn't play much last year. When he did play, he wasn't great. He was fine in the Orange Bowl against Tennessee, but he wasn't great. And I will also say, I think that the expectations that people have for freshman 5-star quarterbacks has been highly inflated because of what we saw Tua do in the second half of the national championship game against Georgia back in the 2017 CFP. And then obviously think back to what Trevor Lawrence did when he was inserted for Clemson back, that'd been in 2018, I believe, right?
There's been a lot of redshirt freshmen that kind of excel. Think about it. Johnny Manziel, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota. You know, these guys can have a lot of success right off the bat. I think getting Garrett Riley is huge. It's Dabo Swinney admitting you need to make some changes. He used to always brag about staying in-house, having the same assistants for 10 years. And now he goes to TCU and grabs, you know, pretty much the guy that got them to the national title. People like Sonny Dykes, but a big story on the side was, holy crap, Garrett Riley can call plays. So I like Clemson, and I'm going to be honest with you. I think Clemson wins the regular season. But when the two rematch in the ACC title, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just pretty confident that those two are going to get there with Clemson having the higher seed. Gun to my head, I think Florida State probably wins a rematch. I think Florida State has better wide receiver talent.
No, I think they do, and I think the addition of Keon Coleman's massive for them, like I said earlier. If there was a team that makes the ACC title game that isn't one of these two, who would you circle as a potential dark horse? Because I think that these would be the two prohibited favorites in the ACC this year entering the regular season, which is just about 12, 13 days away now.
I'm hoping Brendan Armstrong has a bounce back year at North Carolina State.
That's an interesting pick.
They're winning 8 games a year. They're winning 9 games a year. If Brendan Armstrong plays like 2021 standards, that's going to be a great football team.
Yeah, I would go Pitt. I think Pitt is a program to watch. They had a transfer quarterback as well. I believe he comes from Boston College.
North Carolina is going to be good.
Who?
North Carolina.
Yeah, I just don't know if they're going to be able to stop anyone defensively. They do have, in my opinion, one of the 2 best quarterbacks in the country with Drake May and a potential Heisman winner with him. I am a little bit interested to see what kind of happens with their receiver situation as well. We obviously know that one of their transfer receivers isn't going to be able to play as of right now because of transfer waiver situation. But we'll kind of see what kind of happens with, it's Tez Walker, by the way. We'll kind of see what happens with that. He's appealing right now, and they're going to need to get him available for Drake May to, I think, have his full level of success that's possible this year. They do have some other talented guys at receiver, Landon Stevens, Chris Culver. But yeah, I think the 2 prohibited favorites are Clemson and Florida State entering the season. But I like your NC State pick there.
Potentially, watch out for that. But hey, North Carolina, I mean, they've been scoring 35, 40 points a game, but the problem is they also give up 35. That was a good football team last year. They started 9-1 on the season.
Yeah, they just couldn't stop anyone. They were like the East Coast version of all the Pac-12 teams that we're going to talk about a little bit later.
But they've been having this issue. I remember 2015, they made the ACC title game. The defense was bad. They just haven't been able to figure it out.
All right, let's transition over to the Big Ten, a conference that I think we're a little bit more familiar with personally. We'll start with the Big Ten East. I'll go first here.
Okay.
Just because I think the East is a little bit more fun to predict for this year, even though the West is just as tightly contested at the top, I think, in a lot of people's opinions. I'm picking Michigan. They've obviously got to come out on top against Ohio State and Penn State. And I think that there's a real possibility that those 3 teams potentially all have 1 loss, which I think would be a lot of fun in the final year of the Big Ten East if they all find a way to beat each other and one of them's not undefeated heading into the Big Ten title game. But I'm going to pick Michigan. I think they have too much talent on the offensive line. They've got a rotation of 6 or 7 guys who could all potentially be draft picks. I think J.J. McCarthy is probably one of the 2-3 best quarterbacks in the league entering the season. I'll be intrigued to see if he ends the year there. I'm not exactly as high on him as other people. I don't love all the first round buzz that he gets. Like if you go back and watch some of his film, everyone talks about how well he played against Ohio State. I don't really think he played that well against Ohio State. He didn't do anything that made me, open my eyes and say, wow, that was a heck of a throw or that was a heck of a play against the Buckeyes. And then he throws 2 pick sixes against TCU in the CFP last year. I also like that they have, in my opinion, one of the 2-3 best running back rooms in the country with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. A little bit of a hot take. I actually think that Donovan Edwards is better than Blake Corum, and I think a lot of people are going to be saying it at the end of the season. Obviously, Corum's coming off that knee injury. And then I like what they have on the defensive side as well. They got to rebuild their pass rush, but they do return Mike Sander still in the secondary, and that's obviously a big thing for the Wolverines on the east side of the division, too. I'm picking to come out for a 3rd straight year.
OH. You love Ohio State.
I do think Ohio State can. I think Ohio State can win it.
They will.
Putting in bold font.
I will. Like, dude, last year, okay, we watched that whole first half. Do you know there was a point where Ohio State had like 150 rushing yards to Michigan's 10? I mean, Michigan couldn't do anything. The only reason why they won that game is because Ohio State cornerbacks kept falling on their faces. J.J. McCarthy found a couple wide open guys, and Ryan Day called too many screen passes and not enough, forward verts. Ohio State's the better team. They have more talent. They have the best wide receiver room in the country. McCord's going to be good enough at quarterback.
Are we sure McCord's going to start?
Supposedly there's a straw poll and it's 50-50, but I think McCord's going to
It sounds like they're going to play both of them against Indiana in week 1.
And it doesn't matter. It's Ohio State. Name me the worst Ohio State quarterback in the past 16 years.
Chris Beckham.
Yeah. It was the guy in 2007, Bosman, and then he got replaced by Pryor the next year. So no, I like, let's look at this Ohio State roster. Stover, underrated tight end. You got Fleming at wide receiver, Harrison at wide receiver. Defense last year was pretty much top 15 before they blew up against Michigan and Georgia. They're just going to outscore Michigan. And Ryan Day needs this. Ryan Day could honestly be on the hot seat if they lose this year. So, no, I like Ohio State. They're not losing to Penn State. It's going to be a home game. I think they go up to Ann Arbor and win. J.J. McCarthy hasn't done anything to show that he is an elite quarterback.
Yeah, so the way I think if they do end up losing to each other, the three teams in the East, I think Penn State loses at Ohio State. I think Michigan would lose at Penn State. And I think Ohio State would lose at Michigan in the final week of the regular season. Just because, and I'm basically just picking the home teams in those games, more or less. Back to Ohio State and why I didn't pick them. I do agree that I think they have more talent. If you look at like blue chip ratio, team talent composite, recent recruiting class rankings, like Ohio State certainly has more talent. That is, I don't think, up for debate. But they do have to replace obviously the starting quarterback with CJ Stroud being drafted by the Texans. We still don't know who their starting quarterback is going to be. Now, I do think that their starting quarterback is going to be really good regardless. I don't think you can't be good when you have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka as your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. I think Emeka Egbuka would probably beat wide receiver 1 for maybe 131 other programs in the country. So my concern with them is they have to replace both of their starting tackles and their starting center on the offensive line. And similar to quarterback, it doesn't seem like they have figured those out completely at this point. Now, I think they probably will. They've also got some transfers in the secondary, but I just feel like the known commodity of Michigan's offensive line gives me a lot of comfortability. And even if JJ McCarthy doesn't take the step into being a bona fide first-round NFL draft pick, I know they're going to run the hell out of the ball.
If they were playing week 2, week 3, I'd be like, yes, you have serious concerns. You know, like in 2014, Ohio State had to replace Braxton Miller, who was out for the year. And they played Virginia Tech in week 2. New quarterback, new offensive line, inexperienced secondary. JT Barrett threw 4 interceptions. He was getting sacked. Virginia Tech, who went 7-6, put up 35 points. And then all of a sudden, Ohio State gets better throughout the year because these 5 stars gel. And to end the season, they beat Wisconsin 59-0 and win the college football playoff relatively easy. They dominated Oregon. I could see a similar situation to this year. Is McCord going to be a great quarterback in week 1? I don't know. CJ Stroud had some struggles when he first began at Ohio State. But, you progress towards the year.
CJ Stroud didn't really take off until, was it week 3, week 4?
Yeah, people were worried about him, and he turned out to be a great quarterback. 2021 Michigan, that was a great team. They dominated Ohio State. Last year, the score looked crazy, 22 points. But people that really watched the game, Ohio State controlled that game in the first half, and they gave up in the second half. And that's an issue. But talent-wise, substance-wise, no, I think this Ohio State team, personnel-wise, they should win. They should beat Michigan. And they should be ready by week 12. And if they're not, Ryan Day might actually have to go.
So
because everything's on the line.
Okay, so who do you have Ohio State presumably beating in the Big Ten title game? Because I'm just going to assume that the East ends their reign undefeated over the West.
I actually have
straight, right?
Well, I actually have
and all 10.
I actually have Ohio State being upset by Illinois, and here's why.
Okay, shut up. No, you don't.
I have Wisconsin winning the West.
And Ohio State beating the Badgers?
Beating the Badgers.
Yeah.
Close game.
So a decade straight of the Big Ten West dominating the East dominating the West?
Yes. Of course. They're better football teams. There have been a couple of Wisconsin teams that I think probably could have won, like Wisconsin, Penn State 2016. Wisconsin was up 28-7 and blew the game. That just can't happen. That Iowa Michigan State team game in 2015, that was a coin toss. But these Wisconsin Badgers, I've been seeing a lot of Illinois fans really not respecting the Badgers, comparing them to the 2008 Michigan Wolverines, who went 3-9 under Rich Rodriguez. Very funny. The quarterback, Tanner Mordecai, is not some random pro-style quarterback that Rich Rod is trying to make into a spread guy. Tanner Mordecai has a track record. Tanner Mordecai is a 4-star from Oklahoma who transferred to SMU and had a prolific offense for 2 seasons. They're going to get a nice quick passing game. Braylon Allen's a good running back. The wide receiver room has been boosted up with good recruits from big programs. Defense every year, now with Mike Tressel's defensive coordinator, top 15, top 10. I'm sorry, they are better than Illinois. They are going to outscore Iowa at Camp Randall. They're going to go 11-1, 10-2 in the regular season. The only for sure loss is Ohio State in the regular season. I like the Badgers, man.
Yeah, so I feel like they have gotten a ton of pub here in the last couple of weeks, which is a little bit interesting because I think for the longest time, there was a lot. So I guess following the teams who have started to get a lot of pub and interest entering the season, I think back to pre-spring practices, it was Penn State. There's a lot of people getting in on Penn State. And then post-spring practices, it was Texas. And then now, as the season approaches, I feel like it's Wisconsin. And I'm kind of starting to feel more Wisconsin momentum as well, personally. And I actually thought about changing this, but my pick is actually Iowa entering the season to win the Big Ten West. I think that their offense is going to be just good enough. I don't think it's going to be a generationally bad offense. I just think there's too much talent there for the offense to be as bad as it was last year. Obviously, Michigan transfer K. McNarma is on the offense as a quarterback now. Eric All transfers in to play tight end opposite Luke Lachey. We know how much success Iowa has developing tight ends. Caleb Brown transfers from Ohio State, a former top 100 receiver. I think that those kind of additions will be huge for them. Now, I do think that there's some concerns about the offensive line developing it probably needs to. But I think that the same thing can be said about Wisconsin. I think both of those offensive lines last year underperformed relative to the program's expectations and what we've become to know of those two programs and the expectations that they have for their offensive lines. I just give more faith to Iowa's offensive line. I think being better because there is continuity across the offensive line. And say what you want about Brian Ferentz, the offensive coordinator. He certainly deserves all of the heat that comes his way. But he knows how to be a very good offensive line coach. If there's one thing he knows how to do, it's how to coach the offensive front. I do think that group will take a step forward. So I'm picking Iowa because I think their offense is going to be, around 70 to 85-ish nationally in total offensive stats. And I expect their defense under Phil Parker to, again, be one of the best in the country. I know they lose Noah Shannon potentially for a full season because of the NCAA suspension on his gambling stuff. And they've got some other concerns there over at Iowa. But I'm picking Iowa over Wisconsin just because of the continuity aspect of it, but it's very close. I think the Big Ten poll that Cleveland.com released, I think they were separated by 1 vote or 1 point. So I think that's a true toss-up. I think that's a true toss-up between those two teams to win the Big Ten West.
I'm going to sound like Brett Bielema. Hey, I understand your reasoning, but yes, in theory, the offensive line might be better. You look at the personnel overall, but they have to play each other. And realistically, do you think the Iowa Hawkeyes are going to go into Camp Randall, a place where they've won twice in the past 20 years?
I don't know if they necessarily have to win that game to win the West.
But they have to play Penn State too, so that's an extra loss.
Ohio State goes to Camp Randall. That's
I know. So that evens it out. So if they lose to Wisconsin on the road,
but I think there's a potential. I think there's potentially another loss for each team on their schedule.
So if they both go 6 and go 7-2, who gets the tiebreaker? You're saying
I don't know. I think it's going to be very close between the two of them. I think that there is a world where Wisconsin does lose at Camp Randall to Iowa.
So that's pretty much what I'm saying is if you think Iowa's going to win the division, 99% means that they win at Camp Randall. And I think that's unrealistic. So I got to take the Badgers. If this was at Iowa, if this was a crazy night game in November, the two rivals playing in Iowa City, I might take the Hawkeyes. But I think the schedule favors up very nicely for the Badgers. If you take out that Ohio State game, this is a cakewalk schedule for Wisconsin. Their other two crossovers are Indiana and Rutgers. So I don't know. We'll see. But Ohio State will win the Big Ten or Michigan. It's going to be one of those schools because the West doesn't have a chance.
Yeah. Whoever comes out of the West wins wins the reward of getting their ass handed to them by whoever wins the East.
But what strange game is James Franklin going to drop this year that he's not supposed to?
I don't think he drops one.
10-2.
I think they go 10-2, which is what they did last year.
I know, but it's like, where's the improvement there? And I guess you
I
can't
think
really
they go 10-2. I think they win their bowl game and end the regular season 11-2.
win the
Or end
Peach
the
Bowl.
whole season 11-2 after winning their bowl game.
Yeah, Franklin's stuck there. The 12-team playoff is going to do Penn State very well. It's going to give them a chance.
I don't know if there's a program in the country who benefits more from the 12-team playoff than Penn State.
Well, they're going to benefit most from Jim Harbaugh going to the NFL, and then they can finally.
Hey, that's my prediction. You can't.
I just read that. I think you copied that from other people because I'm starting to read that all around.
No, I just think like I mean, the suspension stuff. Well, and we can talk about it briefly if you want. I mean, the suspension stuff. Now he's suspended for 3 games. Clearly, Michigan's trying to get out ahead of it. And it sounds like he was kind of like, hey, like
he's not happy about the suspension. He's not happy with the school about the suspension.
But I think he's just like, I don't care. Like he's not happy, but like he's back before the Big Ten. They're going to be 3-0 regardless.
It's the principle of it, though. It's like, dude, why are you suspending me? It's not looking good. I can see it. You're brilliant. That was a really good take, Bussy.
Thank you. We'll see if it happens. I think it's probably less likely than likely that he leaves Michigan after the season, but we like to go out on a limb sometimes and have some fun predictions, and that was one that I put out there.
I'm seeing people pick Michigan to win the national title.
Yeah, that I would never do.
I don't care if Georgia's playing Helen Keller at quarterback.
I think I would actually be surprised. Like, I would actually be surprised if Michigan won the national championship. And they're the preseason number 2 team in the country. Like, I just don't think that they're good enough to win the national championship this year.
What is the last pro-style team besides Florida State to win a national title? Bama in 2015, I guess.
I mean, Georgia runs more of a power-ish style offense. We can talk about this later. Let's jump to our Big 12 predictions.
Okay.
We'll get to the CFP and everything later. All right, moving to the Big 12. I'm actually very curious to see what you picked here.
Oh, it's Texas.
Okay, Texas against who?
Oklahoma.
Oh, you're really going to make Big 12 people upset with that prediction.
Yeah, that's what it should be. They made the conference, and they're going to leave it.
Who's winning?
Texas.
Okay.
Dude, 49-0 last year. First of all, Texas is just better. Great offensive line. I think Quinn's going to be phenomenal. Return 10 players from the defense. Defense, underrated storyline. One of the most improved in the country last year. I mean, compared to what we've seen with Tom Herman. It's not great. I mean, they still had games where you give up, 34 to Oklahoma State, 34 or 27 to Kansas State. But it was an improved product. And in the Big 12, I think it's going to be good enough. I like Gabriel as a quarterback for Oklahoma too. And I really like what Libby does as a play caller. I think they're going to bounce back. I think Oklahoma could be a 9-3 program this year, but that's a lot of Big 12 schools. I mean, Kansas State realistically, yeah, I mean, they're all the same.
There's a world where they all go 9-3.
Yeah. Have fun with with the tiebreakers with that.
Yeah.
No, in the last year, I think the cream rises to the top, and I think Texas wins the Big 12. You might see Texas in the playoff. Just saying.
Okay, so we'll get to that later because I wanted to do that, but I couldn't. So I'll tease that with my 4 playoff teams. I couldn't put Texas there. I don't have the trust for them to go that far yet. I do have them winning the Big 12 though. I have them beating K-State. This K-State roster returns their entire starting offensive line. They returned their starting quarterback and Will Howard, who was pretty good last year. He did have a pass completion percentage under 60%. But I think it's like 14 touchdowns to 4 picks, I think, in about half of the year. They actually have to replace Deuce Vaughn, who's going to be really difficult to replace, but I like what they did in the offseason, adding Trishawn Ward, Florida State transfer. DJ Giddens is another capable tailback. So I think their rushing attack will be a little bit more diverse. We'll see how their receiver room plays. They add Keegan Johnson, a transfer from Iowa. And then defensively, they have to replace Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who was the last pick of the first round. Coming off the edge. So that'll be tough. But they do return some other key people on the defensive side, like Khalid Duke, Daniel Green at linebacker. And they also have to replace the starting corner who got drafted by the Colts and Julius Brents. But when you return your entire starting offensive line, it's really hard for me to pick against that when you also return your starting quarterback. Now, if you wanted to say, the Big 12 hasn't had a team go to back-to-back playoff or back-to-back conference title games since I guess it would have been pre-pandemic. And that would have been Oklahoma, I think. That's a totally fair argument. If you want to talk about how K-State's never won back-to-back Big 12 titles, and they had a lot of really good teams in the late 90s, early 2000s, like totally fair argument. I just really like the continuity there. Chris Kleiman has a great culture there. And again, when you return 5 starting offensive linemen, and I know that they believe a lot in the offensive linemen that they have behind them, it's really hard for me to pick against that. So I'm picking K-State to be in the Big 12 title game against Texas. But I do think the Longhorns beat them for the second time in the season when they beat them in Arlington.
The program that we're starting to hear a little bit of buzz about, dark horse, if you want to consider it, is Texas Tech.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of people take them, and I know you've talked about it. You almost took them to the Big 12 title game. I'm seeing 9-3 predictions for the Red Raiders. But
yeah, they're going to be good.
Do I trust that defense to slow down, Texas and Kansas, like a Kansas State rushing attack, shutting down a Texas offensive line that's also pretty much, being brought back. Texas Tech, good program. They can put up some points. But through the course of 12 games, do I think they're a top 2 team? Not at this point. I really like what McGuire's doing. I mean, they found a guy that wants to be there and is qualified to be there, unlike Wells from Utah State, unlike Tommy Tupperville, who left after a couple seasons. I mean, it's a good hire, but at this point, let's stick with the Blue Bloods. Kansas State's kind of a Big 12 blue blood.
Kind of. They actually have more Big 12 titles, I think, than Texas.
They probably do.
Which is hilarious to say.
Last time Texas won anything was 2009.
Yeah, it was. You talked about Texas Tech being a little bit of a dark horse. I kind of want to pivot to another team in this conference who I think people are maybe circling as like an important year, Baylor. I'm interested to see like what the direction of that program truly is under Dave Aranda. They won the Big 12 in 2021 in his second year, but his first year was a COVID year and they weren't good. But I'm not going to hold that against him too much because it was a COVID year in 2020. But then last year, I think that they were picked to be in the Big 12 title game before the season. They fall short. I forget exactly what their record was at the end of the season.
6-7.
6-7. So they lost their bowl game. They had a lot of one-score games not go their way. They've got to kind of take a positive step, I think, this year. So I'm intrigued to see Baylor in the Big 12 this year too. I'm not picking them to go to the title game, of course, but I'm intrigued to see like what the direction of that program actually is.
Was it a sugar rush with Matt Rhule's program and Dave Aranda?
Yeah, exactly.
I think Dave is a good football coach. He was one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. Even if you look at last year, they were competent. It was a sad year. They were actually Big 12 favorites. It was all clumped up together, but they actually had a plurality. They were projected to win the Big 12. I'm just looking at their schedule real quick. Utah non-conference game, that's a loss. At TCU, tough game.
Is that a loss? We don't know if Cam Rising's going to play because of his torn ACL.
I don't know, man.
And it's in Waco.
Yeah, I don't know. But in the Baylor, would you be surprised when they won the Big 12 2 years ago? They were supposed to be a 7-5 team.
No, I think that there's like 10 teams in the Big 12 that you would be like, would you be surprised if they played for a complete title game? I'd be like, no.
If Texas,
which is why I think the Big 12 is so much fun.
This is what's going to happen to Texas. They might actually win the Big 12 this year, but they could start 2-2 because they got at Alabama, at Baylor. Those are tough games. Couldn't you see them beat Alabama? If they beat Alabama, I will bet my life they lose to Baylor. I will bet my life.
It would just be a very Texas thing to do.
I will bet you $1,000 you can win your money back from Texas A&M.
It would just be a very Texas thing to do and realize that's what we're doing, picking Texas to win the Big 12, is to not do the thing that Texas has done basically for the last 13, 14 years. They lose to stupid teams that they shouldn't lose to. Like they go to Iowa State late in the year. It's probably going to be cold. It's, I believe, the second to last game of the regular season. It's in November. It's one of the 2 times they leave the state of Texas all year. The other being the game at Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Like that's a game that Texas like historically would lose over the last decade plus, and they probably should have lost to Iowa State last year if Xavier Hutchinson reels in that catch in late in the fourth quarter.
It's just such a manageable schedule, dude. Like Houston, that'd be like a trap game. They're not going to lose that.
No, they're going to pound Houston.
Is Dana gone?
I don't know. That's gotten a lot of talk since we did our hot seat episode.
I think it's a very good job.
I don't. I think it's overrated as a job.
I
I think people see it and see like the idea of it being a good job, but no one's really had a lot of success there for a long period of time. And anytime you do, you're probably going to jump to a bigger job in the state. So maybe now because they're in the Big 12.
Do you think Texas Tech is a better job,
or a Baylor or a Texas Tech because they're essentially equals? But you would always jump to an A&M or a Texas or Oklahoma's like kind of in that same region if it ever became available as well.
Well, those jobs don't always come open though.
No, they don't. They don't come open very often. Well, the Texas one does, I guess.
I'd take the Houston job over Texas Tech.
I think now I might, considering they're both in the same league, but maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move to the Pac-12. This is the conference I think is actually going to be the most fun this season. Without a doubt, I think this is going to be the most fun league. The top half of this league is deep. It's explosive. There's going to be a ton of points, and the quarterback play in this conference is absolutely ridiculous in a good way. I'm fired up for the Pac-12 this year, and if you're not staying up late to watch the Pac-12 and its final year of true existence, you're missing out because it's going to be real fun. I got USC and Oregon playing for the title game. I do not feel great about picking that, especially because of USC's last 6 games. They are tough. It's an unreal stretch of games that USC has to end the season. And I think it starts with Notre Dame in about the midpoint of the season. And let me pull up their schedule here real quick. Yeah, they play at Notre Dame on October 14th. They then play Utah. They play Cal. They go and play Stanford in LA. They then go to Oregon, and then they end the regular season against UCLA. That is horrible. That is so tough. You're probably looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 ranked teams in that stretch if UCLA has a good year. 10 a year, 5 straight, 5 of 6 ranked games. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence.
Caleb
Williams. But they have Caleb Williams, and I think that their offense is going to score a ton of points.
Yes.
So I've got the Trojans and I've got Oregon. I like Bo Nix. I think their defense is going to be better. They just got to be a lot better stopping the run. Oregon does. Oregon State ran it 31 times down their throat last year to end the game, the Civil War. So I got the Ducks. I just think I trust the talent that USC brought in on the defensive side more than Washington. Like Bear Alexander, Mason Cobb, a couple examples. And Dan Lanning's a defensive coach. So I kind of expect their defense to take a step more than I do Washington's this season, with Kalen DeBoer being obviously more of an offensive-minded head coach. And really, like, USC's defense got slammed by everyone last year, but Washington's was almost as bad.
Yeah. USC is going to score 42 points. They're going to give up 35. But it's going to be entertaining. This is the last year of real college football as we know it. And the Pac-12 is going to be great, and that's what's so sad about it. Like, in a perfect world, if I could close my eyes, I would love an Oregon State Pac-12 championship.
I think we all would.
Like, beat USC and just be like, yeah, we won. We're going off to Mountain West, but go F yourself. Like, we just won.
Celebrate with your chainsaw on the sidelines.
It would be awesome. And that is a good football team. Went 10-3 last year, returned a bunch of guys, preseason top 25. You think DJ is going to cut it, though?
I think DJ will be better in that offense, yeah.
It was kind of hard to watch at Clemson, but it should work at Oregon State. But my pick's going to be USC Washington. And the reason why I'm taking Washington is I love Penix, and Oregon has to play at Washington. I think that's going to be a tough game. I think Oregon might be the better football team, but home field advantage. I'm going to go with Washington in Seattle. And for the Pac-12 title game, let's go USC. I think Caleb Williams in his last year, Heisman Trophy winner, I just gave away my pick back-to-back, is going to outscore Michael Penix. And it's going to be a phenomenal football game. USC makes the playoff and loses to Georgia by 42.
By 42.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
No,
they would score. They would still score against Georgia.
It'd be 72-30.
That might be. Yeah, so I have USC winning it as well. But I do think that, like, I think the league is just going to be so much fun. Like, there's just going to be a ton of points scored. It's such a good league this year. The top half of it is great. The bottom half, like, certainly does not bring a lot of juice. When you look at teams like Stanford, I don't think Cal's going to be very good, but some of those bottom tier teams in the league still have some juice to them. Colorado is going to be a magnet to watch. Now, they might not be fun to watch after like week 2 or week 3 if they get absolutely blasted against TCU and Nebraska, but they're still going to be entertaining because they have Dion and they have Shadur. I think Arizona State's going to be potentially interesting because they're starting Jaden Rashada week 1 at quarterback, a former top 50, top 60 national recruit. Like that's fun. I know Arizona's over under is around 4.5 or 5.5. But Jaden DeLara is a lot of fun to watch at quarterback too. And Jed Fish has got that program trending in the right direction for Arizona. Like even the bottom tier teams in this league this season, like have interesting aspects to them that other leagues can't offer. Like there's nothing interesting about Northwestern this year other than the absolute dumpster fire that it's going to be. There's not much interesting about like Mississippi State this year. And I know they have a first year head coach in Zach Arnett and everything else, but like there's just not as much interesting there. There's not as much interesting, I guess, at the bottom of the Big 12, other than the fact that it's like those 4 new programs, like which one of them is at the bottom of the league, or does West Virginia State on there as well? Like these bottom 4 teams in the Pac-12, to me, like there's an interesting thing about 3 or 4 of them that's just so fun. Like this conference is awesome this year.
I think Deion's gonna have a panic attack when they start 0-3.
I can't wait to see him run on the field in Dallas. I guess Fort Worth in week 1. It's just gonna be so awesome.
And then playing Nebraska, that's an old Big 8 rivalry. I mean, that's a huge game. 2 first-year head coaches. I'm pulling for Nebraska. I'm a Big 10 guy, but Deion's gonna be fun to watch all year. Washington State is a competent program.
Yeah, them too. I didn't even mention them. They have Cam Ward.
They're gonna go 7-5, 8-4. Like that's just what they kind of do. Every team's good. The teams that don't matter, Cal, no one cares anyway. Stanford, like those 2 right off the bat, but everybody else, there are compelling storylines. And I think the quarterback play is just great. I mean, Bo Nix was a joke at Auburn. He was not that good, and now he's had second life at Oregon.
He was always entertaining.
He was entertaining. And he's going to be good with, another year under his belt in Eugene. I like it.
I think he's a Heisman dark horse. I mean, if you go look at like where his numbers were tracking, they were very similar to Marcus Mariota's the year that he won the Heisman last year until late in the season when he kind of started to deal with some injury stuff.
They don't have the speed like they used to, though.
They don't. But
offensively, it's not the same weapons.
No. So you have – we'll actually get to this later. All right, let's move to the SEC. I know we differ here based off of some of our conversations and text threads and everything this week. Let's get to the SEC. I think we both have Georgia.
Yep.
Should we write that in Sharpie?
No, I will say Georgia's the clear favorite. Don't get me wrong. But I do think Milton is a good quarterback. I think they're going to put up some points. It's going to be a crazy game in Tennessee. Tennessee's going to be a 10-2 football program. Would I bet my life that Georgia wins at Tennessee? No, I wouldn't. I'm going to say it's likely, but I wouldn't bet my life.
I would.
I would say a 95%. Did you watch
those 2 teams play last year?
Yeah, at Georgia. And Tennessee's it was an upstart program. They went from 5-7.
That had a Heisman hopeful quarterback that should have been in New York and 2 stud receivers. Now, I do like Brew McCoy. I like Squirrel Wright.
It's the
Squirrel
defense.
White. But you think that offense is going to be as good this year?
I think
the biggest reason Tennessee could beat Georgia is because the game's in Knoxville.
And I said that was part of the reason. Would I bet my life that Georgia goes into crazy Knoxville and wins? No, I wouldn't bet my life.
Yeah, I would.
Okay. Have fun.
Yeah, they're going to go 12-0.
So, yeah, I'm taking Georgia in the East. And in the West, I will be taking Alabama.
Alabama.
Roll Tide. It's going to be a different team. This isn't the Bryce Young years. This isn't the Tua years. Probably going to be thrown at 45 times a game. They're going to be running the ball. You're going to see some carries for McKellen, Williams. You're going to see, a greater emphasis with the play action pass. But the biggest thing for Alabama, the difference between the national championship winning teams in the past 2 editions of Alabama, they're giving up 20 points a game, not 13 points a game. There has been a difference with the style of defensive play. They've been getting gashed. Nick Saban never. Last year was the first time they've ever given up 52 points in a game. When Tennessee put that up in Knoxville, that's really got to change. That's the big difference with Alabama. Is it enough to beat Georgia? Maybe not. Like, as we talked about it, you probably got to put up 40 points to beat a team like Georgia. But to win the West Division, what's going to be key is getting that defense back to Nick Saban standards.
Yeah, so I'm picking LSU.
You think they're going to go into Tuscaloosa and win?
I think that I would take 6 or 7 players on LSU's roster before I would take 1 player on Alabama's roster right now.
You have no faith in Nick Saban.
I see. I listen. The biggest fear I have against doing this is because the game is in T-Town. But historically, LSU actually plays them better in Tuscaloosa and Bryant-Denny than they do in Death Valley for whatever reason. I really like this LSU roster. I like the depth that they have at the top. I trust Jaden Daniels at quarterback. I think that, obviously the Mason Smith suspension, I think, is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that he's missing the first game of the year against Florida State is beyond stupid. But Harold Perkins might be the best defensive player in the country. Malik Neighbors, I think, is probably the best wide receiver in the SEC. That's like 3-4 guys that I think that Alabama would just love to have on their roster this year. And I just like Jermaine Burton transferred from Georgia last year and had like an year for Bama. I'm still waiting on Ja'Cory Brooks to like live up to his 5-star potential as a receiver. He's never done it. The receiver room, if you read stuff coming out of Alabama's camp, has had a ton of issues with drops. That's great when you have 3 quarterbacks who no one actually truly believes in, it seems like. Jalen Milroe is like probably the highest ceiling of them all because of how awesome he is as a runner, but people question if he can actually throw the ball. Tyler Buckner transfers from Notre Dame after being very mid last year. Ty Simpson is a redshirt freshman, just like Jalen Milroe. I mean, Dylan Lonergan has kind of gotten some pub here of late. Saban said good things about him. He's a 5-star freshman. I think that they're going to be good at running back. Jace McClellan's going to be good. At running back, they're also going to have Justice Haynes, who's, I think, the 2nd or 3rd highest rated running back in the 2023 class. They'll run the ball well, but I don't trust their offense. I don't think that they're going to be able to score enough to consistently beat teams that are playing for a college football playoff bid. And defensively, they're going to be really good. Like, you look at guys that they have returning at key positions on the edge. They're strong there with guys like Dallas Turner. They have Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's one of the better corners in the country. They have some talent at safety too, with some freshmen that they're bringing in, like Denzel Ricks, things like that. But no, I don't trust the depth there, and which is weird because they have a 90% blue chip ratio, but their top line, like, I just don't think it's as good as LSU's. And I fully respect that people are like, you know what? They have Nick Saban. That game's in Tuscaloosa. I fully get all that, and like I respect it. But I think LSU's top line is better.
They do have a better front seven. Great front seven. Great quarterback. Better quarterback.
Yeah. And like, I will say this about Jaden Daniels. If Jaden Daniels is going to be good enough for them to be undefeated or have just one loss heading into the SEC title game, which is where I'm predicting them to be, he's got to be second half of the season Jaden Daniels, and he can't be first half of the regular season Jaden Daniels, because first half of the year he was not very good, but second half of the year, he was really good. By the way, I didn't mean to say Des Ricks. I meant to say Caleb Downs, freshman safety for Bama. He's gotten a ton of good pub.
So how are you feeling about Texas then? If we like LSU, what don't we like about Texas beating them at Alabama? And is Nick Saban going to lose 2 home games? The first time since 2007.
I think that they can beat Texas. I think they can beat Texas because the game's at home in Texas. I don't think is as proven as LSU is. But the reason that I'm more confident picking LSU is because LSU's done it. LSU's beaten them. LSU, their top line talent has proven to be really good. And so is Texas's, right? Like, Caleb Banks is really good. Obviously, we know Xavier Worthy is really good. We know A.D. Mitchell's good. He's got to stay healthy. like we're kind of projecting a little bit with Quinn and him being able to take a step that I think he's going to take. Like I think Quinn Ewers is more likely to be a first-round NFL draft pick than Jaden Daniels. But I think I know that Jaden Daniels has the potential to be a really good college quarterback, more than Quinn does right now.
Yeah. Just roll back to Alabama real quick. Last year, close game, went to overtime. Brian Kelly goes for 2. That's awesome. The real reason why we're not taking Alabama is because of the quarterback play. If they had a Bryce Young, if they had a Tua, even if they had a Jalen Hurts.
It's also the receivers, though.
But, Bryce Young,
they're not throwing to Jerry Jeudy. They're not throwing to Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith or Henry Ruggs or Amari Cooper or Julio Jones. Like, that guy's not on the roster.
So you think LSU, they lost 4 football games last year. Is that just growing pains with Brian Kelly?
They won the SEC West.
At night, I mean, they got dominated by Texas A&M, and they went for 2 against Alabama. Like, congratulations. Alabama was the better football team last year than LSU.
Were they? They lost to LSU.
Yes, they lost at Death Valley in a crazy overtime game, and they didn't lose to Texas A&M.
But why are we talking about last year?
Because
different teams. They don't have Will Anderson lining up on the edge. They don't have Bryce Young.
I just think when there's a bunch of 5 stars, they're going to have a great running game. I think they're still going to be good.
I don't think that they're not going to be good. I think they're going to be very good.
And
I don't think they're going to be better than LSU.
I think Daniels does battle inconsistencies. I don't think he's this great quarterback that everyone talks about. I think he's talented. The guy sucked at Arizona State.
He was pretty good at Arizona State until Arizona State started to trend downward under the latter years of Herm Edwards.
They were trending downwards in the beginning too. It was a terrible hire.
It was not a good hire, but they won a couple bowl games, or went to a couple bowl games.
Boston College goes to bowl games. I'm so sick of this bowl games. It's a good season, but I'm going to take Bama. It seems like the trendy pick is LSU. That's what ESPN likes as well. They think LSU is going to win that game. But
Bama's picked as the favorite at SEC polls.
What's great is Georgia can do what Alabama does and just better. And they're just better than LSU as well. I cannot wait for a Georgia 3P to join the likes of Army and Minnesota.
All right, let's get – all right, so you're picking Georgia to win the national championship for the 3rd year in a row. Let's get to the CFP.
No, I'm not going to say that yet. But they will win the SEC.
Let's get to the CFP. Who are your 4 teams playing in the CFP?
So we got Georgia, SEC winner. We got Clemson. I'm going to change my mind. Clemson, ACC champs. They're in it. Ohio State. And then fight on, baby, USC. Here's the thing with Texas. I think they're really good. I think they're going to win the Big 12. But realistically, I could see them losing to Alabama and losing at Baylor.
Yeah, I think
you're out.
So I fully agree with that with Texas. I think if they lose to Bama, it puts them in a really tough spot to basically have to run the table for the rest of the season. So that is why Texas is not in my Final Four or CFP. I'll let you know right now. My CFP is going to really piss people off.
Yeah,
I've got Georgia, Michigan, LSU, and Ohio State, which is just going to really infuriate people if we get 2 Big Ten teams and two SEC teams. But I think that LSU, this is how high I am on LSU. I think LSU goes in the SEC title game undefeated. I already said I think Georgia's doing that. And I think 1-loss SEC teams generally get into the playoff. And I think that we're looking at a similar situation in the Big Ten last year with Ohio State and Michigan potentially both going into the game undefeated. And I think the Big 12 champion is going to eat itself alive with Texas. I think that FSU, like I said, are going to have a loss to LSU in week 1. And then if they lose to Clemson either time, they're in trouble. Or if Clemson loses once or twice, I think they're in trouble. And I think that the Pac-12 eats itself alive as well, just because I think that there's a lot of really good teams out there, and I think that they're all pretty closely matched. So those are my 4. And my national championship is Georgia versus Ohio State. So we get a rematch of the semifinal last year, which was maybe the best game of the season. And I've got the Dogs winning 3 in a row. But I'm going to caveat this. I don't necessarily think that Georgia's going to win 3 in a row. I just don't know who else to pick to win to win and like feel more confident. Like I feel more confident in Georgia winning than anyone else, but I don't actually think Georgia's actually going to win the title.
Like if you had to take the field, Vegas gave you the odds, you'd take the field.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Whereas last year, I picked Bama entering the season, and like I would have said, if someone was like Bama versus the field, I probably would have said Bama. Then I would have been wrong, obviously.
It's just like
I did pick Georgia heading into the 2021 season, though.
I know, and they did lose in the SEC title game by
and
a
they
lot
did win the national championship,
because
which
Bill O'Brien called an awful game.
is all that matters.
Alabama should have won that game. I know what you're saying. It's like you can't take Georgia just because we're basing it off of precedent, but we don't have substance of why Georgia won't win the national title. Like why not? Is Stetson Bennett the pre-loss?
Carson Beck isn't as good. Their defensive tackle position, which has been incredible the last 2 years, led by Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, isn't as good. They lost their projected nose tackle to USC with Bear Alexander transferring there. The secondary isn't as good after Keely Ringo departs, but like I think their offense is going to be really good. They're going to run the hell out of the ball. They have two really good receivers, and by the way, they have Brock Bowers and maybe the best offensive line in the country, led by the best center in the country in Van Pran.
In 2022, they only returned 4 defensive players, and they were just as good defensively. Like I think Georgia's getting to the point.
They weren't just as good as defensively. They were still very good, but they were not just as good.
I'm sorry. They went from 12 points to 13 points a game. Like, come on.
Yeah, but the way that the 2021 defense played was ridiculous.
Not against Alabama.
They were playing base defense the whole game.
So they purposely they're like, we want 2 teams.
They're like, we're in. So like, we're not. They were like, we're in, and if we have to play Bama for a second time, we'd like Bryce Young to not see our complex coverages live.
That is just bullcrap and unfalsifiable. That is just a ridiculous point. Can you just admit that Alabama, like they found the blueprint? If you want to beat Georgia, like we saw with
Ohio, and then they got killed and then they lost in the national championship game.
They did not get killed.
I stopped myself after I said that, and they lost in the SEC title game, or they lost in the national championship game.
With Lane Kiffin,
we're not rehashing old arguments. Who's winning? Who do you have in the national championship game?
If Steve Sarkisian was the offensive coordinator instead of Bill Bryan, they win that game.
No, they don't.
And so my playoff. So we got Ohio State, we got Georgia, we got Clemson, we got USC. We got Ohio State, Georgia, chalk, chalk, chalk. Ohio State wins the national title.
I could see it. They would honestly be the team I might pick second or third. LSU would be in that same conversation.
It's going to be Georgia. What am I saying? No, Georgia wins the national title. They're going to win some cheeseball 45-41 game. Ryan Day is going to be hated, and Georgia wins a three-peat. But it's within the margin of error. Those are the 2 best programs this year. Those are the 2 teams that can realistically win a national title. And I can feel confident about saying it. I don't think it will be a team outside of those 2.
Show some conviction. You already changed your mind once.
Dude, we're predicting something that's happening in January.
Who are you picking? You sticking with Georgia?
I'm going to stick with Georgia.
Well, you just picked Ohio State.
I'm sticking with
Georgia.
Georgia.
You've now changed your mind twice. Who are you picking?
I just told you. Georgia.
All right. You're picking Georgia. All right.
They're going to win. Power spread. Defense.
The Dogs. 3 in a row. For first time since the 1930s Minnesota Gophers.
I think Army, actually, in the 40s. It's the first time since Army.
Speaking of Army, that leads me into actually real quick. We've got short time before we get into trivia. You said that you think Caleb Williams wins the Heisman Trophy this year, becomes the first player and only player since Archie Griffin to win the Heisman twice. Tell me why you think Caleb Williams wins, and give me a reason why he won't win, because he also is my pick to win the Heisman.
Right. It's just very simple for me. They make the playoff. I think they're going to have 1 loss. But if they go 12-1 and make the college football playoff, how do you not give it to Caleb? And Caleb's not a guy like a Colin Klein in 2012. Like a good story, and they're in the mix, but he only has 16 passing touchdowns. Caleb is going to put up video game numbers, and he is the best player in college football. Come on, we watched him last year. We saw him at Oklahoma as a freshman. He's incredible. So if they make the playoff, he wins it. If they don't make it, there's no chance he wins it. They'll give it to a playoff contender. They'll give it to someone else.
So
So
I'm
I
picking
don't
him for a lot of the
you're
same
reading
reasons.
it. If they don't
So
make the
I'm
playoffs,
picking him for a lot of the same reasons. I just
yeah.
know that Lincoln Riley quarterbacks put up a ton of numbers. And I think that there's a potential for him to put up very similar numbers to what he did last year. Now, there's a lot of voters who might look at that and be like, well, he didn't get better, so I'm not going to give him a vote. I think that's kind of like the situation that Bryce Young was in entering last season at Alabama, and then actually like they weren't in a position to even have him in New York for the Heisman ceremony.
Right.
But yeah, I'm picking Caleb Williams because I just know the numbers that he's going to put up are going to be huge. I just don't know if they're going to be good enough for him to win the Heisman if they're not playing in the playoff. And like I said, I'm not picking them to do it, but I just think he's going to potentially throw for like 55, 60 touchdowns again this year. And he's going to run for a dozen or 15 or whatever it is. And it's just hard for me to know that someone's going to put up those numbers and pick against that.
That's the difference between, the Alabama quarterback that's trying to win it back-to-back years. Like if you take Bryce Young out, like let's look at their other quarterbacks they had. They had Jalen Hurts. They had Tua. I mean, Mac Jones put up crazy numbers. Caleb Williams means more to USC than Bryce Young means to Alabama. Like if I take Caleb Williams off of USC last year, that's a
They're
6,
horrible.
7 win program. He won them 11 games. And he was not the reason why they lost to Utah. He's not the reason why they lost to Tulane. Caleb Williams played like they should have gone 13-0, but the defense let them down. So Caleb just means so much to this upstart USC program. It would be criminal. It'd be immature if the writers just don't want to give it back to back. There's no reason why he shouldn't win back to back.
It would be very sports writer-esque to do that though.
It just realistically, it's like, who do we give it to? Like, yeah, I'm hearing Penix. Washington's going to go 10-3. Bo Nix, same situation. Is Daniels going to beat Georgia? Like, yeah, okay. If Daniels puts up video game numbers.
I mean, I think that this is a year where someone could win the Heisman that's not a quarterback. Like why can't Brock Bowers win it? I know a tight end has never won it, but Brock Bowers is going to be Georgia's best player. Marvin Harrison has the potential to win it. If you want a running back name, Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, Quinshon Judkins at Ole Miss. Like those are a few guys who I think could do it as well.
Yes, if Blake Corum runs for 2,300 yards, 25 touchdowns, and Michigan's a dominant 13-0, I could see it. But that's not the best player in college football. They're just filling. It's like the MVP in baseball. They're giving it to the team that made the playoff, or is that
a lot of times there? Yeah.
So, yeah. And with Bowers, I just don't think you're going to get Marvin Harrison production as a tight end. I think it would be really hard. Like he would have to put up wide receiver numbers, and I doubt that happens.
I mean, I don't think he puts up Marv numbers, but he's going to be the best player on the best team.
I think Marvin would be a good value bet for Heisman. Like if Ohio State makes the playoff and Marvin puts up 22 touchdowns like Larry Fitzgerald, absolutely he can win the Heisman.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. All right, sticking with the Heisman, this is actually going to be my trivia question today. Because I'm picking Caleb Williams to win the Heisman Trophy, my question for you is how many times has a school, the same school, had back-to-back Heisman winners throughout history?
How many times?
Yeah. How many different times has a school had a back-to-back Heisman winner?
Oklahoma's one.
Yep. 2017 and 2018. Baker and Kyler.
Twice.
No, 6 actually. Alabama in 2020 and 2021, they had Devontae Smith and Bryce Young. That's Oklahoma right. In 17 and 18 with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. USC 2004, 2005, Matt Leinart. I don't know why I said it like that, Matt Leinart.
And then
Bush. Ohio State in 74 and 75. I believe that would have been Archie twice. I don't know who won it. Army in 45 and 46. And Yale in 1936 and 37. So USC could become the only school if Caleb Williams wins the Heisman to have the Heisman winner in back-to-back years, not only as an individual, since Archie Griffin, but USC would become the only school to have the same Heisman winner. Would be the only school to have 2 Heisman winners in back-to-back years.
You know what they consider one of the biggest upsets in college football history was in 1945, Army Notre Dame played. It was 1-2, but Army was the overwhelming favorite as the number 1 team in the country. They played at Yankee Stadium. They finished to a 0-0 tie, and they thought, "Wow, the fact that Army didn't beat the crap out of Notre Dame was shocking," because Army was a powerhouse back then. I mean, they were great. That's your fun, useless fact for the day. My trivia question for you. Can you name me the 2 co-national champions of the 1990 college football season?
1990?
Yep. There's co-champs.
Colorado?
Yes.
See, that would have been after Notre Dame won in 87. That would have been Colorado and is that Nebraska? No, that wouldn't make sense. They're in the same conference. Don't count that. Don't count that guess. Don't count that guess. Colorado and I have no clue. Yeah, go ahead. Give it to me.
The Rambling Wreck, Georgia Tech. You didn't know that?
I feel like I did know that. I just forgot.
The worst pair of national champions. They're both going to go 3-9, 4-8 this year. I mean, those are laughable programs. But that was college football back then. They didn't have the best teams in the country play each other. If you won the Big 8, you went to the Orange Bowl. If you won the Big 10, you went to the Rose Bowl. If you won the Southwest, you went to the Cotton. It was so segregated back then. It didn't make any sense. So, yeah.
Give it a year, and it's not going to be segregated at all. So
it's just going to help Georgia and Alabama win it more because they get second chances.
Sounds about right. Well, Carson, that's all the time we got for today. We will try and be back again tomorrow so we can talk a little bit about the weekend's games. Throw some picks down for those if you've got time to hop on for a quick show. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of the Bussy and Gordy Show. If you can, on whatever platform that you're listening to us on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever it is, leave us a review, leave us a comment, leave us a 5-star rating because I like 5 stars. And so does Carson, even though he likes his 3 stars occasionally too. So thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it. And have a good one, everyone. Enjoy your first weekend of college football if you're listening to this.